Gray family here from Blues Guitar Unleashed. Welcome and thanks for joining me today. In this video, just kind of want to throw a little bit of an idea out at you. And I was thinking about the song Cheap Sunglasses by ZZ Top. I heard it on the radio. And it's a little bit, it's not a blues, right? It during the solo section of that tune, it basically goes back and forth between two chords. One is a C minor 7, which is a really common, blues rock type of chord is the minor 7. But it could, be just a straight minor. But the minor 7, like I say, is very common in a lot of blues rock music. Another incidence of this would be Couldn't Stand the Weather by Stevie Ray Vaughan. I'll kind of show you that one too. So we have a single minor chord, right? And from there, it's just going to be there for 4 bars, and then it's going to go down to a B flat, a major. But remember, we're going to kind of bluesify it, so you can kind of imagine that it's a B flat 7. Now, for example, in Couldn't Stand the Weather, I think it's B minor, A, G, which I call that the Stairway to Heaven changes. When you have a minor chord, down a whole step to a major chord, down a whole step to a major chord. That's what I call the Stairway to Heaven changes. But it's a set of changes that you see a lot. Okay, so we have, like I said, going back to Cheap Sunglasses, the solo sections, the C minor for 4 bars, going down to a B flat. Okay, and then it comes back to the C minor, and then after that it actually goes up to D minor, and then from there to a D7. But we don't need to go that far to show the idea that I want to show you. So the idea that I want to show you is, based around the sort of chasing the chord philosophy. So a lot of times we talk about, over a 12-bar blues, you have different options. You can just play the 1 minor blues scale the whole time, right? So if we had a blues in C, right, it'd be C7, F7, G7. We'd play C minor. We could play C minor blues the whole time. We talk about sometimes that you can, assuming that all of the chords are dominant 7th, you can use a little bit of the major blues sound as well. And in fact, you can use either. So I could use, over the 1 chord, over the C7, I could use the C major blues sound or the C minor blues sound, or both. Okay, and that's a subject for another video. We've talked about that in the past. Over the F7 and the G7, the more common philosophy is to go back to the C minor blues. But if you feel comfortable enough doing it, you can reconfigure your fretboard and actually treat this F7 like it's its own new key and play F major or F minor blues, or a little bit of both. Same with the G7. I can play a little bit of both, all starting on a G instead of a C. So I'm effectively chasing the chords. Little Wing is another song like this. There's a lot of songs where if the chord progression is not a traditional 12-bar blues, the best approach is just to chase the chord. So what do I mean by that? So over that C minor 7, because it's a minor family chord, it's not a major chord, we don't have a lot of choice. C minor pentatonic is going to be the way to go. And I can use any of the 5 boxes. I can use blue notes. Everything C minor is at my disposal. Truth be told, if you're a modal person, you could even use a C dorian mode. You could even use a C dorian mode plus the flatted 5th from the blues scale, which would give you a lot of notes. Admittedly, I probably wouldn't play them all together. Unless that's the sound that you're really looking for. I would tend to stick to mostly the minor pentatonic, adding in the occasional note from the Dorian scale. That's just my personal preference. But what happens when we go down to the B flat? Okay, well, what we can do there is, because we have 4 bars on this chord, and then we have 2 bars on this chord, we have a nice long stint on each chord. So instead of having to really look it over and figure out what everything is, which is going to be a challenge, okay? If you were to try to analyze this from a theory perspective, 2 chords does not a key make. It's really not enough information to determine unequivocally what is the key that we're in. We kind of need 3 chords. It really helps. So what we're going to do is, when the B flat comes along, I'm going to do everything in B flat. All B flat minor, or B flat major, or a little of both. When the chord goes back to C minor, I'm going to go back to a C minor pentatonic. Okay, so this is a pretty cool instance of this type of thing. Oh, and like I was saying, Couldn't Stand the Weather by Stevie Ray Vaughan, right? I might have the key wrong, so bear with me. I think it starts in like B minor, like a B minor. Right, and at the very beginning of the tune, you know, he kind of noodles. And then it goes down to an A7. And he plays a little A minor blues thing there. And then it goes down to G7. So he plays a little G minor blues thing. And then the very last is like the F7 sharp 9. Okay, and I don't think he really plays anything there. It's just the chord. But notice how for every new chord, and it's by and large box 1, right? It's by and large that same old box 1 pattern that we typically use. So it's cool because it will follow the chords, particularly when they're dominant 7th. The minor pentatonic will always give you that sort of bluesy sound, okay? So let's say that you wanna practice on this idea, because obviously it's a great way to practice changing keys. Another thing you want to think about is a phrasing concern, which is, I want, probably in general, I want my idea to stop and to end so that the band can change chords and I'll come back in I'll say the new scale, okay? So that means you're gonna have to kind of keep your ears open, right? You wanna start an idea or a lick or a phrase. You probably want to have it end just before that chord change is gonna happen. Once that new chord change is established, you can start your idea in, I'll say, that new key. It's really just a new chord. So how are you gonna practice that? Well, I think the easiest way to do it is to record yourself, okay? So what I'm gonna do is just take, my good old looper here, and I'm gonna go back and forth between a C minor 7 chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4. And now I'm gonna go down to the B flat, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and now back to the C minor. A 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the looper takes over. I'm gonna stop because here comes the change. And here comes the change, so I stopped. Here's the top again. Here's the change. Here's the change. And there's the top again. So obviously I'm, kind of keeping track in my head of what the chord is, what beat we're on, how close are we getting to that next change. Obviously that's a skill. That takes some practice. Okay, so this is a great way to practice it. If you don't have a looper, I have a lot of people ask about loopers. I love them. I was sort of, was dragged kicking and screaming into the looper world, but now that I have a couple of them, I don't know how I'd ever live without them. They're so great for practicing things like this. But another way to do it is to record yourself, even if it's an old school, handy cassette recorder. You're just gonna have to play it a bunch of times on your own, okay? Just play that pattern a whole bunch of times on your own. Maybe give yourself like 5 minutes just playing that. That's what I used to do back in the old days. I had a cassette recorder in my music studio where I practiced in my bedroom, and I would just hit record and I would just play for 5 minutes. I just watched the clock and I would just keep playing that chord progression for 5 minutes. At the end of the 5 minutes, stop, rewind, play, and I improvised over it. Nothing's really changed except that the computer does the looping for me. Now I only have to play it one time through instead of for 5 minutes straight. That being said, probably for many of you watching this video, it would be a good exercise to have to play that same chord progression for 5 minutes and keep the time and keep it sounding good. That's a skill in and of itself that is worth cultivating as well. Set a metronome, play in time, right? All these things that we talk about, that's a great exercise, okay? So for soloing, this is definitely an experimental kind of thing, something to play around with. Try the, just the C minor and the B flat. Try, the chords from like Couldn't Stand the Weather from that intro. Just, pick some number of bars of each chord. It doesn't have to be the exact chord change, but really try to pay attention so that you're stopping your line, the chord changes, you start up again in the new key. I think it's a great skill to cultivate. All right. So again, I'm Griff Hamlin from Blues Guitar Unleashed. Hope you enjoyed the video. As always, if you've got some friends that you think might dig this video, please share it with them. And as always, I will see you soon. Take care.